Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of Experts in the Wire. I'm your host, Dan Shore. I'm doing a solo episode today. This episode is for you if you're wondering, how do you actually do something different to your content for on-page optimization to also optimize it for AI and the LLMs? There's a lot of people throwing out ideas, but everything I see on LinkedIn and in blog posts is just all the same stuff we've been doing for SEO. If you've been doing SEO well at all for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 plus years, like an old person like me, you've been doing everything that everyone's talking about. They're just renaming it, right? They're just giving it a new brand. They're trying to make it sound like something fancy that no one's ever done before. But every post I read, it's the same stuff we've been doing. But today on this episode, I want to share something with you that I've been having clients do to optimize their content that's actually new and different from good on-page SEO optimization. And yes, this method that I'm going to tell you about, very excited to share, is experimental. It's a little bit more falling in the let's see what happens category. But at the same time, I know that there's a lot of validity to it, because when you step back and think about these things logically, it just makes logical sense. As such, a lot of SEO should. And a lot of people overcomplicate SEO, or they try to make it like fancy or sound inaccessible, so then they get hired to do it. But I'm going to share things that are simple and accessible and actually new. And I believe down the road, this is going to play out to be correct. I've recognized a pattern in myself where I will start doing things, months ahead of other SEOs. And then stuff comes out that, hey, you should, be topically complete, or, you should use transactional language on a more bottom funnel page. Like, I tend to be a little bit ahead. So I want to break a pattern here where I've sort of doubted myself and actually share with you these things that I've been doing with clients that I think are going to play out to actually be critically important for your on-page SEO and a lot of marketing in general. So let's get into it. I want to start with a little context, and then I'm going to share 4 things that you should be adding to your on-page content to possibly improve AI visibility. But I want to start with a post that really flew under the radar by Miriam Jessier. She's been on this podcast in the past, a couple of years ago. Really smart SEO and marketing expert. Definitely give her a follow on LinkedIn. She shared a piece of a study that SEMrush just did. And the study was overall about how people are using LLMs and AI compared to SEO and search engines. There was a section in there with a header in the SEMrush article reads, "Most ChatGPT prompts don't match traditional search." Okay, what does that mean? In Google, as Miriam says in her LinkedIn post, which I'll share in the show notes, she puts a Google query might say something like, quote, "Best project management software 2026. It's a keyword. And even that's a little bit of a longer keyword, right? Best project management software could be the keyword, or just project management software. But on ChatGPT, as this study found that SEMrush did, people go there and prompt. So in ChatGPT, somebody might say, "I manage a remote team of 12, and we keep missing sprint deadlines. What should I change?" That's conversational. That's a very different thing that the human that we're trying to reach and connect to is putting into the tool. And I'm going to read a little bit of Miriam's post here. She goes on to say, same person, but the second version is how they actually think. The first is a habit they built because Google required it. In search, behavior research, we call those learned workarounds scaffolding. The term comes from cognitive science, temporary structures you build around a system's limitations. You internalize them so completely you stop noticing that they're workarounds. She goes on to say, Google rewired our brains. Keywords, Boolean operators, adding a year to get fresh results, knowing that how do I returns different results than why does. Basically, the gist of what she's saying here is the platform or the tool and the UX and the UI of it changes our behavior. Google's a search engine. It trained all of us in the world to think and type and query with keywords. But ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and LLMs, they're a different tool with a different experience and a different way that we interact with it as humans. And so that's changing how people are interacting with these tools and how LLMs cause a different query and prompt and behavior than search engines did. So why does that matter? That matters because people are not just typing keywords into ChatGPT. In fact, the SEMrush study showed that there's a spread of, it's like 80% of the prompts don't match traditional search keywords. And that right there is the big thing everybody is missing when it comes to AI and LLMs. Everyone's talking about ranking factors. How do you get cited at an LLM? But so many people are forgetting to actually look at the human behavior behind how we're using the technology, because that is how people are going to win with AI search and understand how to leverage that to reach people. We need to understand how humans are using the tool. Number one, because as marketers, we should be aiming to help people using something and searching for information. We should be able to understand what it is they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it and what makes them feel like they were successful. But also, this brings me to my second point in my last interview, or second to last interview, with Niels Reimers, who is the inventor of Espert, which is a technology Google and all these big Netflix and all these big platforms use for natural language processing to understand language. And he's an LLM expert. When I asked him point blank, what is something that you should do to be more likely to be shown up in an LLM answer? And he said, have text that's as similar or close to the prompt as possible. So meaning on the page that you're hoping to get cited, you should have text that is similar or close to the prompt. And if you think about it, that makes sense. What did a search engine do? They looked for the presence of the keyword that you searched on the page. And way back in the day, it was like as primitive of just using how many times did you say that keyword? And now that's over optimization. But, back then it was keyword density. But search engines still do that. Google's going to look for the keyword the person searched in the title. Is it above the fold? Is the page about that topic? And that's a keyword paradigm. But in a prompting paradigm, the LLM is going to look for what's something as close to that prompt that we can find. Is that on your page? And if we go back to what I read just minutes ago, Miriam's example, in Google, best project management software 2026, keyword. But in ChatGPT, the prompt may say something like, I manage a remote team of 12, and we kept missing sprint deadlines. What should I change? What I hear there is not a keyword. I hear a job title, what that person does, a problem or a pain point, and then the query. What should I change? What should I do? But nowhere in that prompt is the actual quote unquote keyword. So I want to get to my on-page optimization recommendations, something that is totally brand new. But should we throw away SEO? Should we throw away being topically complete, having the keyword on the page, thinking about what reading level should we be writing in? All the really good natural language processing elements that I've incorporated into SEO in the last 10 years, like thinking about sentiment, thinking about things like, should we speak informationally or transactionally? I've optimized content that way for so long, right? I think about things like, should the content be verb driven? Like do this, do that, telling the user, providing action, or should it be passive and informational? What is this thing? What are the benefits of that thing? All of that language really matters a lot. And I think it matters way more than what you're going to see a lot of people talking about on LinkedIn. But personally, I've helped hundreds, I don't know if it's hundreds, many, many dozens of clients across hundreds of pieces of content perform really well by optimizing with language and getting that really dialed in. But like I said, all those things we've been doing for regular SEO, and yes, all of those things will help for AI and LLMs, but what's new? Okay, here's what's new. And here's the 4 things that you can go do to your content. Again, a little bit in testing territory here, but if we really put the pieces together and pattern recognize, I think this is the thing to do to make your content surface better in large language models. Now, in my mind, I'm calling this the all method, ALL. Add the LLM layers to your content. I don't know if that'll stick. I'm trying to brand that a little bit. This is the all method for AI search optimization. And what I mean by that is we're not throwing away SEO. This is the really great thing about this. We're just adding these 4 elements to the foundational SEO optimization we've been doing all along. So if you've been writing with good structure and good headers and good semantics and being topically complete and all these things that we should have been doing all along since 2017-18 when BERT came out, you've got your foundation, but don't throw that away. Right? Interestingly, AI is adding a layer on top of search engines, right? An LLM is often just searching a search engine via grounding by layering agentically on top of the search engine. Well, you can take that same idea, and that's what we're doing to content. We're layering on top of a well-written SEO foundational piece of content. We're layering on these LLM elements. So what are they? Number 1, person. So like ICP, persona, demographic. I'm going to share some examples in a moment. Number 2, pain points. Number 3, short-term goals, as in outcomes, literally, or emotional aspirational outcomes. And then number 4, long-term goals or emotional outcomes and aspirations. So I'm going to go through a couple examples. I'm actually going to use one from a content brief that I worked on with a client that I think is really good. And it's in the B2B space, but this can apply to, any situation. So for these 4 items, what I'm working on in content and having clients and writers do is either directly provide these 4 areas of information or indirectly signal them. And some may matter more than others depending upon the topic or the piece of content. So you could really focus on 1 or 2 of them. Like if you want to focus on persona and pain points, maybe that makes more sense given your topic. So use your judgment. And that's part of the idea here, right? There's no actual just blind formula that you're going to follow for any piece of content. If you're doing content really well, it's going to be different for each article. But the thing that's universal is these are your 4 items, almost like a buffet that you can choose and select from. Getting a spam phone call. So if we're talking about number 1, persona and ICP, or your target audience, if you're in B2C. If we go back again to Miriam's prompt and think about how you all prompt, whether you put it in your prompt or it's saved in your like ChatGPT history, ChatGPT learns who you are and what you do and what topics you're interested in. This prompt says, I manage a remote team. Okay, manager. Right? And we know they're looking for project management. So project manager. So the theory is, if you have the words project manager, or you're speaking to that person, you're more likely to be cited and shown in AI search, because that matches the prompt, or it matches the data that LLM has on you and your personalized information. So this client, I'm going to use the examples there in the sales space, and we are creating an article that is a guide to industrial sales. So for their job title or persona, they just have in the content brief, sales leaders in industrial companies, sales directors, VPs of sales, C-suite executives. So in our content, we're going to layer in either, again, directly speaking to those people, so using those words, or indirectly making it clear that this is who this content is for. And then thus the LLM, I believe, is more likely to pick out and cite your content, because not only might it rank well in Google and in the grounding process and get found in the training data, but it's going to have stuff related to the prompt in there. So number 2 is pain points. And so what we listed in this case of an article about industrial sales is the pain points are, it's a long and unpredictable sales cycle. There's oftentimes multiple stakeholders. It's difficult to navigate the distributors and channels. It's highly technical buying process. Inconsistent sales performance across reps, difficulty scaling, etc. So again, your pain points are obviously going to differ. But what's really interesting here, if we just step back for a second before I get to items 3 and 4, is where I see AI search kind of going, and what we need to do as SEOs and marketers is this is just taking us back to the human level of marketing and content, which is really ironic because the technology is the quote unquote AI. But people are using AI in a more human-like way, which is, I know that's a whole other conversation, right? About should that even be happening? We could debate that. Message me on LinkedIn, Evolving Dan. Dan Shore, S-H-U-R-E. You can find me either way. But because the behavior of people using AI is more conversational and human-like, and they're expressing emotions and pain points, that means we should be doing maybe what we should have been doing all along, is incorporating clarity around who we're talking to, who this article is for, but also being clear and communicating the pain points of that person looking for a solution or prompting in the AI tool. So again, that's where, if you connect the dots between how are people prompting, let's focus on human behavior. And then what we know about LLMs being more likely to cite you if the prompt is on your page or something similar to the prompt. And then just common sense, right? So I have a rule of thumb where I'm not going to do something only for SEO or for AI search if I wouldn't do it anyways. So back in the day when like link building was a lot bigger of a thing, I wouldn't do a certain link acquisition method if I wouldn't do it anyways, if SEO didn't even exist, right? So would I pitch to be on a podcast? Yeah, of course. Would it get a link? Yes. Would I, pay a random blogger in like a very artificial way to like include me in their blog or something, if that's even the best example? No, that's something like I wouldn't do. Right? So that's the general rule of thumb. Anyways, let's get to 3. So 3 is incorporating into the content a direct or immediate outcome. And the nuance here is either a literal outcome, like a result, or an emotional, aspirational outcome. And that's where it gets interesting, because we see, I think, people using AI search almost more like a therapist. So HBR did a really great study, and there's a chart that shows the top uses of LLMs. And I think the top one, at least at one point, was as a therapist. So people weren't quite going to Google as much, like treating it as a therapist, but people are going to AI almost talking to it. And again, that's a whole other debate. Like, should we do that as humans? That's not what I'm here to debate. But if we're looking at how are people using these tools, they are providing more, emotions and struggles and kind of confiding in it more. And so when you're creating your content, that's why I think you want to communicate what would be the clear, direct possible outcomes of reading this guide, and then the aspirational. So for the industrial sales example, my client has factual, immediate outcome, a clear understanding of how industrial sales is working today, practical strategies to improve performance in complex environments. That's great. I mean, that's almost like the thesis of the article, but it can't be implied anymore. Again, if we want to reach people in AI search, I believe that there needs to be a little bit more of a direct communication on the page that that's what this article and guide is doing. And then an aspirational outcome for immediate might be better clarity on how to manage complex deals and stakeholders and how to support your team in doing so. Confidence in improving existing sales processes. So notice there we're using more like emotional words: confidence, clarity, right? Feeling more secure. So that's the distinction. Again, you may put that directly in the post, or you may just sort of indirectly signal it. But at least you're getting a step closer to having things that I believe are more likely to be showing up in prompts. And then an example of the final and end outcome, factual, would be a structured and repeatable process for industrial sales after reading that guide. Aspirational might be predictable revenue growth, better control over the sales cycle, a more scalable industrial sales organization. Those are a little bit more like direct outcome, but I could see if we layer in a little bit of emotion there, it might be, confidence in a predictable revenue growth. It might be something like, if this is a maybe sales manager reading this, it might be impressing your boss, or for them, it might even be getting a raise. What are the direct, like, emotional, immediate outcomes that this person may want to feel if they're looking up a guide to industrial sales? They just might want to feel accomplished in their career. They might want to, have finances to take their family on a vacation, right? So those are the types of things you want to think through when you're thinking about how can you speak to the person that has maybe an outcome in their mind, direct or emotional. So again, these 4 things, what I recommend doing, and I have my clients do, is layer these into the content. That's why I'm calling it the all method. Add the LLM layers. Now, last couple tips here. One of the best things you can do is use AI tools, right? And I know everyone says that, but I started having these realizations about the all method after my wife and I were researching traveling and hiking trips using ChatGPT. And I was noticing, we're problem solving, we're giving it our goals and aspirations for like a hiking trip and our personalized preferences. Maybe things that we want to avoid. We wanted to avoid crowded locations. That's a pain point. And so look at the way you use an LLM. Do you type out long prompts? You likely do, right? And I think we should all be trying to get closer to knowing how people are using LLMs. So a couple other things you could try. You could actually try surveying or talking to your customers or your target customers, you could ask them, for example, prompts. You could ask them how they're interacting with AI. You could put together a survey, and maybe that becomes something that you share in your industry as a piece of content, kind of like SEMrush did here. There's some weird edge case ways to potentially get actual prompt data. Glenn Gabe, who's a great SEO on LinkedIn, shared that you can actually go into Google Search Console and go into links and look at top linked pages and look for ChatGPT. And sometimes public ChatGPT threads will show up in there as a link source to your website. I tried it with a few sites. I only found them on sites that get like a higher amount of traffic. So maybe it's a little bit of a toss-up if you're going to see that. And I know for a while ChatGPT was indexing, maybe accidentally, some of their threads. You could try searching Google, site : ChatGPT, I think it's /thread or whatever it is, to look for any publicly available threads. But I think as SEOs and people that, if I'm assuming the goal of what we are doing is to help people that are using these search tools. I mean, look, we made the mistake for many, many years, and people continue to make the mistake of doing SEO in a way where we're just thinking of it as this process of optimizing to rank well. But the pivot to make always is to think about how are we helping the person searching, because that's the ranking factors are always going to catch up to that at some point. They just have to. It's like a principle, it's like a law of physics. And the mistake everyone's making right now is they are treating the LLMs like it's, an algorithm where we're just trying to hack it and rank well and show up there. And the conversation is not at all around how are we helping the people actually using the LLMs. So I would do whatever you can to get as close to understanding how is your customer using AI search. How are they prompting? What are they struggling with? As long as you keep looking for that and working on trying to help the person that's using the tool, I believe in the long run, and hopefully short run too, that you will win. Thanks everyone for this special solo episode of Experts in the Wire. Stay tuned for next time. You can find us all the places. If you're watching this on Spotify, that's where the video is. Please subscribe to that. But I'm also on iTunes, YouTube, all the places. And as I said in one of the last episodes, if you are looking for help with your SEO, AI search, and even YouTube and video search and visibility, which I also do, you can reach out. My email is dan@evolvingseo.com, and I'll see you all next time.